Hey bitches, it's me Pallavi, and this week on Dirty Science, we're gonna talk about polygraph tests and liars. Pretty little liars, big little lies. XOXO, Gossip Girl. Liars! What happens when we lie? Your heart turns black and your soul goes to hell. Your dick falls off. What happens when you lie varies, but we'll get into this a little bit later. What kind of people are good at lying? My exes! People who are more successful at lying are highly confident, happy-go-lucky, dominant personality types, because these types of people appear to be more honest overall. You know, those types of people who constantly post inspirational quotes on public platforms because if they forget to remind themselves how to stay calm, they'll start punching holes through their own drywall. So how do we view truthfulness? So the way that we interpret if people are honest or liars is often based on physical cues. Cues that we interpret to indicate truthfulness include pleasant facial expressions, more rapid speech, greater eye contact, and fluid gestures. People who are more successful liars scored higher on social desirability and motivational distortion, or a need to present themselves in a more positive light. This is why I don't trust charming dudes. Least successful liars seem nervous, apprehensive, shy. People view cues such as self-touching, scratching, speech disturbances like and to indicate that people are lying. Probably because if you self-touch, you'll go blind. But in general, humans are really bad at detecting deception. In studies where people attempted to tell lies from the truth in real time with no aids or training, people were only correct about 54% of the time. They correctly identified 47% of lies as deceptive and 61% of truths as non-deceptive. And people are more accurate at detecting deception when it's only audible and not visual, which is why this is a video. You'll never know the truth. People also appear to be more deceptive when they really want to be believed. So yeah, we get that you have a black best friend and that you voted for Obama, but if you keep saying it, you'll seem racist as hell. People also tended to believe the partners that they interacted with were telling the truth. There is a double standard, however, because people do judge each other's deceptions harsher than their own. Except for me, I'm great. So why are we so bad at detecting deception? Well, we play into stereotypes, we have a bias for believing that people are telling the truth, and we tend to believe people's demeanor, where we believe that how people present themselves reflects on whether they're telling the truth or not. Those cues that we were talking about earlier. In everyday life, we don't really get feedback on whether we accurately judge someone as deceptive or not. And also, people are good at it, lying. So play into that fucking stereotype, bitches, and you'll never have to parallel park again. So all those cues that we talked about earlier feed into our bias about how people should look when they are telling the truth and when they're lying. Harvard psychologist Nancy Etkoff found that maybe we're not good at detecting deception because we're paying too much attention to the language of what's being said rather than the context. We're listening to the lyrics instead of the beat. Aphasics, people who have trouble interpreting written and spoken language, were actually better at perceiving if someone was being deceptive or not because they weren't paying attention to what they were saying but how they were saying it. Okay, so we lean into these biases that we have of how people should act and talk, and because we pay attention to the wrong things. So polygraph tests, do they actually work? What are they recording? Polygraph tests bring us back to what happens when we lie. It's based on the idea of autonomic arousal. Ooh, hot. The autonomic nervous system controls mostly involuntary reactions. It acts unconsciously and regulates things such as heart rate, breathing, pupil dilation, digestion, peeing. So polygraph tests measure three things: heart rate and blood pressure, respiration, and skin conductivity. They measure heart rate and blood pressure through a blood pressure cuff. They measure respiration through pneumographs, which are positioned around the chest. And they measure the skin conductivity, which is affected by things like sweating, through using electrodes that are attached to your fingertips. Polygraph tests usually contain a pretest, which include questions that start to make the user aware of what's happening and to cause their autonomic nervous system to kick in. It's like foreplay for liars. They'll also often include a stimulation test to show the accuracy of the instrument in determining deception. There are several different types of test formats. The control question test, the CQT. Relevant questions are about the issue at hand. Control questions are about the past and are broader, but they bring up similar feelings. So if the person is telling the truth about the incident at hand, the reason they're being tested, then they'll be more scared of the control questions because it brings up their past truthfulness rather than the specific event where they know they maintain their innocence. If there's no difference in reaction between the control questions and the relevant questions, then the test is inconclusive. There's also the guilty knowledge test, the GKT. So in the guilty knowledge test, if a person committed a crime, then they are asked questions specific to the crime that only they would know the answer to. If a higher physiological reaction happens, then it's likely that they've committed the crime, according to the test. If no deception is detected, then that either means they didn't do it or they weren't aware of the specifics. There's no way to tell. The reason that these tests are highly doubted by both psychologists and scientists is because there's no pattern of physiological reaction for deception. An honest person can be very nervous and a dishonest person can be very calm. Very few studies have been found to successfully validate lie detector tests. Plus, it's hard to separate the fear of being caught from the nervousness of actually just taking the test. It's like, is it hard for me to come, or is it me thinking about coming that's making it hard for me to come? Okay, sometimes my jokes are sad. I need a beer. And polygraph tests are used for so many different functions, there's not enough research in any one area. For example, there's not sufficient research in job security clearances for this to be an effective measurement of someone's honesty when interviewing for a position. So keep saying you care too much. They'll never find out until day one when you want to go home early. There are too many variables. Examiners, examinees, differences in the examinee's education, intelligence level of autonomic response, situational factors, and even variabilities in the technique used to score the test. There are other methods that are currently being explored to tell if someone's lying or not. For example, in functional brain imaging, Dr. Frank Andrew Kozel found more activation in 5 regions of the brain when people are lying. But these results don't support use of this type of brain imaging in real-world experiences to determine if a person is lying. So what do we have? How do we tell if people lie? We can't! So poker is still a sport. Scientists say that the best method of checking if someone is lying is your all-lady group chat. Run background checks in that bitch and figure out from his social media if he's got a wife at home. Check your bitch's mens. You're gonna show up at the end of this.